Welcome to Sulugapur's podcast, and this is a special of the ongoing assembly election series. We have 4 states, 4 podcasts as we promised, and here we go with the Kerala special. Kerala, as we all know, is going through an assembly election in 2021, one of the biggest states in South India. Every time it is usually nothing to discuss, maybe a bit of alliances here and there, LDF, UDF. But right now, we have something interesting going on in Kerala with BJP baiting for the seats that it's trying to look and establish some stronghold in South India. So Kerala and Tamil Nadu are kind of their backdoor hopes in that sense. And to make sense of that is Professor Kailash, political science professor from Hyderabad University, joining us on this podcast. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me here, Najib.
Sir, what is I just ask this to every guest, but there is something different about every assembly election post 2014, right? So is that the case with Kerala as well, considering 2021 in mind?
Kerala, I think this particular election is fascinating for 3 reasons. And I'll take the first reason, which you are hinting at. That is with, I presume it is the entry of the BJP or the BJP's performance after 2014 across multiple states in India. Okay. So in this particular election, let's look at 3 issues. The first one, let's say, is the attempt by the BJP to enter into Kerala, given that it has been doing well across the country. Okay, so that's one thing that we should look out for. The second issue is that Kerala has a unique sort of electoral calendar, like almost like seasons. You change from the UDF to the LDF, LDF to UDF. However, if you look at pre-poll surveys that have been conducted, they show that the LDF has an edge this time. So this particular election stands out, or people talk about it because they expect that the LDF will come back to power, and thereby breaking this electoral calendar that Kerala has been following. Okay, so these are the 2 issues I think that which make Kerala elections interesting. One is the attempt by the BJP to come in. I call it one of the last posts of the BJP.
Yeah.
In this country.
Tell us about the couple of major alliances, right? LDF and UDF. So, for example, if we start with UDF, on the political spectrum, where do they stand, sir? Is it center right or center left, or what do they stand for? What are their principles exactly?
So, the United Democratic Front is led by the Congress party. Okay, the Congress is the coalition maker, and at this moment, I think it has around 7 or 8 parties in this front. Now, the UDF, if you were to look at Kerala as a whole, and you look at I think we cannot talk about the UDF without speaking of the LDF as such. So the LDF is the other major coalition front in Kerala, which is led by the Communist Party of India Marxist. So the Communist Party of India Marxist is one coalition maker, which leads the Left Democratic Front. The Congress is the leader of the United Democratic Front. Now, these 2 fronts, as I just mentioned earlier, have been alternating since around the early 80s. Now, in terms of ideology and in terms of programs, I think both of them are social democrats. Okay, and that would be, say, center and center left. That's where they would stand in terms of ideology. Now, right. What is interesting about this is in terms of the composition of these 2 alliances. I think that also needs to be taken into account to see, to understand their programs and where they stand vis-a-vis issues. Now, the UDF and the LDF also have outsourced their sort of political competition to various smaller political parties. Now, Kerala has this unique, let's say, geographical concentration of communities in Kerala. So you have constituencies and areas where Muslims are predominant. You have other constituencies where the Christians are predominant. Now, the Muslims constitute around 25% of Kerala's population, and the Christians constitute around 18 or 19% of the population. So this also needs to be taken into account when we understand the 2 fronts. Now, within these 2 fronts, you will have smaller political parties which are representing these particular communities, and thereby they have this base in particular constituencies. So no alliance can afford to ignore these communities and thereby these smaller political parties which represent them. Now, if you look at the two alliances, they would have a mix, a sprinkling of all the communities and smaller political parties coming from these areas or territories where you have these communities. Yes.
Every party, like most parties and alliances in various states, right? For example, like if you take Andhra Pradesh, like TDP caters to Kamas, and YRCCP Congress, Jagan Mohan Reddy party caters to kind of Reddys in that sense, Reddys and other backward castes and so on, right? So who are the core for sure voters of these two factions, so UDF and LDF? So if you can start with LDF, for example, Pinari Vijayan, what are the votes he can totally expect them to go his way?
I think unlike other states, it's very difficult to make such a sort of a clear-cut divide between the two fronts in terms of where they gather their votes from.
Sure.
Because if you look at the alliance and look at the composition of the alliance, as I said, they represent smaller groups, they represent different communities. So both fronts are likely to get their votes from across different sections of the population. However, if we were to make a more of a caste-based sort of division that you are attempting to ask, then we would say that the Hindu upper caste will predominantly vote for the Indian National Congress, whereas the Erwa community would prefer the left front. Traditionally, this is how it has been done. However, besides this, we cannot ignore, as I said, the religious communities and the way they are located. So you would have, let's say, the Christians parties are predominantly have backed UDF. The Indian Union Muslim League has been a partner in the UDF. So the two major minority communities have been with the UDF.
In such a leftist political landscape of Kerala, right? Because both of them are leftist. Maybe you can call UDF the conservative one out of UDF and LDF, but both are on the left side of the spectrum. What is, like, let me put it bluntly, what was BJP thinking? What was its idea? Like, do you make any sense of how BJP is even, dreaming to like get into a state like this? I mean, what happened in 2019 elections, and what can you like make an example out of it and comment on their strategy?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question about what the BJP is trying to do. Because if you look at Kerala politics and look at these two fronts, what they have done is there's almost an unwritten understanding between the two. Okay, what in say party system literature would be like, these are like two cartels, and you know how cartels function. They don't leave a gap for anybody else to come in. So both the UDF and the LDF have actually worked like a cartel and kept what in party system literature would be, they have sort of closed the party system. Okay, so when I say closed party system means that you have the same type of parties coming back to power. Who can actually govern is also limited by their certain practices that are there. And it's a limited set of parties which you constantly keep seeing. Now, it is in this context that the BJP is attempting to put its hand in or trying to sneak into this closed party system. Now, the BJP should not be, I think, faulted for it. Is not that it has not tried. Okay, since for a very long period of time, it has been attempting to sort of get into the state of Kerala. And let's go back, not very far, but let's go back to say the period between 2012 and 2014, that is before the 2014 elections. For a long period of time, or around that point of time, the BJP would actually raise this issue of violence in Kerala by the CPM cadre on the RSS workers. You know that the RSS has a large number of shakas in Kerala, and it's a very strong organization at the local level. Now, this focus on violence by CPM cadre on BJP/RSS members was a dominant theme, let's say, between 2012 to 2016 or so. However, this got a lot of attention only at the national level. So you would have 9 p.m. news discussions, etc., on, say, Red Terror and how the CPM has been attacking party workers, etc. Then 2014 onwards, the BJP actually changes track and starts focusing on the Edawa vote. Okay, so almost every important leader of the BJP who would visit the state would actually begin like, let's say, foreign dignitaries visiting India, going to Taj Mahal. So they would actually go to the Shivagiri Mutt. Okay, it's the place of the SNDP and it's the organization there. Now, this doesn't give the BJP any good results in the assembly elections that are held in 2016. It doesn't actually work out for the BJP. It wins that one seat in Trivandrum, the Nemam constituency. That's the first thing. Then towards 2019, the BJP shifts its track or is pushed into taking this track of the Sabrimala issue about the Supreme Court verdict and whether women should be allowed into it, etc. However, here again, I think the space was already closed. And this is where I want to highlight the point about the closed party system, because the CPM took a very prominent stand and a very strong stand about implementing the verdict of the Supreme Court, that is to allow women to enter and worship in the Sabrimala shrine. Whereas the Congress took the other end, that belief should be protected, we should not be interfering in tradition, etc. Now, in this space, where will the BJP go? Because both sides have been occupied. That is, there is the CPM which has said no, and there is the Congress which has said yes. Which has said do not allow women to go. So the BJP actually did not find space to come here. Now, post 2019, or roughly even it was happening before also, the BJP then started focusing on the Christian community. Okay, there has been some sort of a churning that has been going on. There has been a conflict within the community about the control of churches and so on. There's then within the UDF also, there was this tension between the Muslim party, that is the IUML, and the parties representing the Christians. So the BJP, I think, was trying to then fish here to see that whether at least then they can get this Christian community to come and support it. Okay, so for the BJP, I think it is very difficult to push in, given what I call is the closed nature of the party system.
It's more like Democrats and Republicans of the US, right? They are not gonna leave any room to anybody else. But tell me something, sir. Why is it that historically Kerala it's a very unique state, and maybe Bengal, but after Bengal, Kerala has been consistently left-wing dominated politics, right? Unlike the rest of the country. If you can really, it obviously is a very long history, but if you can really briefly sum it up in 5 minutes, what can you really attribute that point to?
That I think goes back to, let's say, the pre-independence period, and it's the history of, let's say, even during before the around at the time there, when you have these community-based voluntary organizations actually coming up in Kerala, and they can actually be, I think, traced to the late 19th century, where you have these communities. So among it, these community-based organizations come up within the Christian community as well as among Hindus, and also among, let's say, the backward class Christians. Also, you have organizations. You also have within the Hindus, the backward coming, you have the SNDP organization. And besides this, you also have, let's say, even for the dominant caste, you have organizations, community-based organizations that are there. Now, during this period, you also have what is called these radical social reforms movements that take place within communities. Okay, so that will actually lead to, let's say, the breakup of, I think the caste system was oppressive in Kerala,
right? And
it removes not only, I think, the issue of untouchability, but there also this practice of unapproachability. Okay, untouchability and unapproachability. So I think the really horrific practices were sort of removed or at least taken away by these reform movements that took place. Now, this also then led to the spread of, let's say, radical and egalitarian ideas among communities. You also had class-based and trade union movements also gaining ground within that. So what you have is that within in Kerala, you would have therefore, given what I said earlier about the territorial concentration of communities, etc., you would have a cross-communal characteristic that is there between communities. There is a lot of intermingling that takes place, that stark differences are not there. Now, to push this to, I think, to where you were hinting at, and that I think your main interest comes about what happens with the BJP, is that here, I think these regional traditions that are there in Kerala have challenged or posed a challenge to Hindu nationalism. It is difficult to build one this thing where you want to break up these communities, because within Kerala, I think there is already an existing, let's say they have already alternate understanding of the past, an alternate mythical past is already there, in which there is this cross movement of communities and intermingling of communities. So Kerala has this heritage of, let's say, religious coexistence.
Sure.
And this, I think, reduces the space for hegemonic all India sort of mobilization that has been attempted.
One more thing that I always wonder about Kerala, which probably happens with Tamil Nadu as well. How is it that a government, an alternate party forms the government every single time? If it's UDF this year, it was if LDF this year, it was UDF last time, and the previous time it was Achyutanandan, and then before that it was UDF again. So how do you explain this switching of alternates? Is it because a small percentage of vote swings and boom, every like the entire seat composition shifts toward one alliance? How do you explain this? And this happens in Tamil Nadu as well, right? It was once it was ADMK, then it's DMK, ADMK, DMK. It just alternates just in one term, which is pretty unique. So how do you explain that with your experience?
Kerala, if you look at Kerala's participation in elections and look at the nature of the competition that takes place, Kerala, I think, has had historically has had one of the highest participation rates. Okay, so people come out to vote in large numbers.
So, like, what voter turnout percentage was how much?
Yes.
Like last year, in last term, maybe.
I don't remember, but it's been relatively high. I don't.
Is it in the 70s?
Yes, I think it's more than that.
Sure.
So I think the voter turnouts have been high. Second is that, which in your question you mentioned about the competition, that is in constituencies, you would find the margin of difference is very low. Okay, so it's there. These are all tight competition for seats. So when you have this tight competition for seats, plus the turnout, then every vote then becomes important.
Sure.
And you also we need to then look at the organization of the two fronts. When they understand that competition is going to be tight and there's going to be heavy turnout, then you also then find that there is greater effort that is put for mobilization. So I think both entities, I think the LDF more than the UDF have I think really worked very hard to win those seats. Okay, so that's one element of it. Second, I think it also has to do with the community-based parties that you have.
Sure.
Because these political parties would want their representatives to have a say in decision making in the assembly. So I think then all this adds to the competition, and all this adds to, I think, the excitement and what makes Kerala elections sort of different or very like there's a lot of involvement in those elections compared to other states.
Because you speak of tight race. I think, was it 2011, if I'm not wrong, which was the most closest fought election in Kerala history, if I'm not wrong, which was very, very close between Achyutanandan and the INC, if I'm not wrong. There was one very tight race.
Yes, I think it was the 2011 election, which it was quite close.
What are the pluses and the minuses of Pinari Vijayan for the LDF right now, right? Because before we get into that question, like, what is the history of anti-incumbency in Kerala? Is it relevant at all? Because anyways, the government switches here and there, or this election, it's going to break the cycle and LDF comes back. What is the history of anti-incumbency sentiment in Kerala historically, maybe in current situation as well?
If you were looking at anti-incumbency, and then if you were to interpret that turnover that takes place, then one would maybe attribute it to anti-incumbency, that people want a change. Okay. But when coming to the 2021 elections and about the Pinarayi Vijayan government, I think general perception is that the government has done pretty well. Okay, because you would notice, you would remember that Kerala faced two major floods during this term of the government. It also faced what is the Nipah virus. Before we had the COVID virus, this thing had Nipah virus. And on both these two fronts, I think the government of the day handled the situation very well. Okay, and has been seen upon, has actually seen to be working for the people. However, when you come towards the 2019 election, the Sabrimala verdict and the CPM stand on that pushed people away, because they thought that the government had used police and force to sort of allow people to go in and stop the protesters, etc. So that, I think, sort of backfired in the 2019 general Lok Sabha elections. You would find that the CPM, the LDF actually did very badly, and the Congress sort of gained most of that situation. However, then 2019, post that, you have COVID, and Kerala has for a long time was the model state for how to manage these disasters. And Kerala, I think, has done reasonably well when it has come to that. So in terms of development initiatives, in terms of welfare programs, in terms of governance, I think the government has done reasonably good. Okay. And this is not to say that previous governments had not done, but this has done it reasonably well. And sort of, you can see that there. However, one also then needs to look, if you're looking at Mr. Pinarayi Vijayan's government as such, one also then needs to see that whether the CPM itself has become sort of an electoral machine. Okay, in the sense that what happens to its ideology, what happens to the programs and its stand that it takes on particular issues. I can give you one example. For instance, when the central government announced 10% reservation for economically weaker sections of society, the CPM was one of the political parties which actually criticized this move at the national level and thought that this was unfair and this should not be done. However, in Kerala, around, I think, 2019, 2020, the government in Kerala actually sets up a commission and then passes legislation for reservation for economically weaker sections of society. So then one needs to rethink or ask about this, is that what happens to ideology? What happens to principled stands that political parties take? The second issue is that which if you were to read papers in Kerala and the discussion that is there, whether this CPM also has become highly centralized, and it's become just like Pinarayi is the face of the CPM. So what happens after him? Okay, so that's sort of a concentration of power in his hands. That's one thing that people do talk about. So when it comes to governance, development, and delivery, I think the government has done reasonably well over the past 5 years.
In that scenario, so what are the UDF's chess moves, if you may call, to gain an upper hand in this election? What are they targeting to gain the upper hand in this election, if you may?
In this, the UDF actually, again, it's not that the UDF has not tried. Okay, so Kerala has had this sort of, it's part of the political culture there, that you do have constant mobilization of people. It's that not that parties only go to people only at the time of elections. So very often if you were to look at, you would find parties actually moving from, say, Kasaragod in the north of Kerala right through till Trivandrum south. So there would be these rallies, there would be these programs that political parties organize. So the UDF, this Congress also has had such programs during the past 5 years. Okay, so it's been trying. So the Congress first, as I said, tried with the Sabrimala issue, and that I think worked well for it in the 2019
So I
election.
think they were pro, conservatism of Sabrimala. They didn't want the women to
Yeah, they
enter.
took the traditional stand that women should not be allowed into for worship into the temple. Okay, so then more recently, you must have heard about the gold smuggling scam or gold smuggling issue that happened, where people working within close to the chief minister's office were apparently caught
Yep.
for this particular issue.
Yep.
So I think at the moment the Congress has been actually highlighting that particular issue. Because if you go back to 2016, the Umman Chandi government was sort of accused of being a very corrupt government, and at that point of time, there was what is called the solar scam. So the Congress was using the gold smuggling thing as a sort of a payback issue to target the Vijayan government. The second issue which has been coming up, and I think the Ramesh Chennithala, the Congress leader, has been very vocal about it, is the point about bogus voters on electoral lists. Okay, that is, you need to remove them from these lists, and I think they've been working on that. So if you look at the slogans that have been the three slogans that the three fronts have put, the LDF has sort of spoken of, say, LDF for sure. Okay, that is, they are sort of confident. Whereas the UDF is saying that UDF for Kerala's development. That's their program. And the BJP has, NDA has been saying that new Kerala under Modi. So I think the focus has been on development, and we cannot move away from development because that's what Kerala is known for. So I think the UDF also has said, sort of saying that we will focus more on infrastructure and other issues as well.
Is NDA biting more than it can chew in this election by competing like more than 110 seats or something? Whose problem will it be? Will there be a vote split? And my view is that I think NDA will be UDF's headache. Maybe it will steal UDF's traditional votes and its advantage LDF. Is that the case? Will there be any vote splitting, or will they even get deposits? What might happen with this three-way contest, which is basically a two-way, 2.1 way or 2.5 way, if you may call it that way? 2.5 is just way too much, in my opinion, as well.
Okay, so if you look at the BJP's performance, let's look at it from, say, 2011. Okay, 2011, then 2016, and now you have 2021. The BJP has always been putting up candidates. Okay, so in 2011, I think it had of the 140 constituencies there, I think it lost its what's it called, deposit in 134 constituencies.
Okay.
Okay, and the party came second in 2 constituencies, that is 2011. Now come 2016, the BJP contests in 98 constituencies, and it comes second in 7 constituencies. Okay, so that's a further
improvement.
Improvement, and
Yep.
it loses deposit only in, say, 62 constituencies. Okay, so that's nearly, it's sort of halved it there.
Okay.
So this gives the party some this thing that, yeah, it's moving forward. So this time it's contesting, as you said, I think the NDA contests 138 constituencies, and of that,
right,
the BJP is contesting, I think, roughly 112, 113 seats where the
Sure.
BJP is contesting. So,
Sure.
But one also then needs to look that the BJP is a ideational party. Okay, it's a party which has a program, it has a clear-cut agenda that is there, and therefore I think, unlike, let's say, the Congress, the party is, I think, here it's a let's say, horse that is running a long distance race. Okay, so it's not looking at 2021. It might not even be looking at, say, 2026, but let's say 20 years, 30 years down the line. Okay, I'm just putting it far away, but it's looking at a distant this thing. So they are willing to work for it. Whereas for the Congress, it's a party which is closely connected with office, and it can survive only when it's close to office. Okay. So the BJP and the CPM are somewhat similar because they are run by ideas. So they can wait for a long period of time. Whereas the Congress, given its close connection with office, might, if successive defeats, then might make it sort of weak, might sort of threaten its base, and then the Congress will have problems. That's my sort of understanding of the way from gleaning from party literature, party studies literature, and the way in which the Congress is. So if you look at defections that take place, why do you have more from the Congress to other political parties, or basically, let's say, office-based parties or parties which are closely connected with office, dependent on office, are likely to have more defections than parties which have a more idea-based aggregation of voters and supporters. So as I think, as you say, I think it is the UDF and the Congress in particular, which will be wary of the growth of the BJP. And I think I can go back to the earlier point that when the Congress takes a conservative position on Sabrimala, and the BJP also takes the similar position, then at some point somebody might ask, do you want a duplicate or do you want the original when it comes to religious issues?
True.
And then people might then have to make a choice. So I think it is the Congress which needs to be more wary of the growth of the BJP, and rather than the LDF and the CPM.
That makes this election all the more vital for Congress, isn't it? Because if they lose this, then the next election would become about their survival in itself.
Yes, I think it's going to be difficult, because if it's so closely connected with office and people are relating everything with what with Congress governments do. So what is the idea that the Congress gives to people? What is it that holds people together? I don't see that there. Okay. So that, I think, we are on a very slippery slope now.
Sure. Last couple of questions. So one question is, like, from outside, Kerala looks like this Lala utopia, Lala land, full of social programs, such a left-wing domination. Why do you think it is very hard to replicate the political landscape of Kerala in any other state in India? Are we way too conservative for Kerala-style politics for the rest of the country?
I don't know whether we should be actually trying to replicate this model, because I think a lot of it is explained by past history and background that I mentioned about social reform movements, the importance given to issues like health, education, etc., even by the princely states in Kerala. Okay, so that's a past that is there. And current governments, post-independence governments, have only taken off from where the past has left it. Okay, so they just advance those developments. So one, I don't think, needs to be trying to replicate the same model elsewhere. Whereas I think if you look at Kerala's neighbor, Tamil Nadu also has done reasonably well. And much of it is come post-independence. Okay, the development in terms of, again, health and education. Yeah, most of it is post-independence. So I think replication is not necessarily a very good idea, because we also need to take into account the context in which all this is happening. And the same context doesn't necessarily prevail there. Okay, so what is your resources? What soil do you expect the tree to grow? That also matters. So I think it also needs to do with governments being committed to social democratic welfare agenda. I think that's what has distinguished Kerala from other states.
Yeah.
Both the two fronts have focused singularly on this and sort of not got distracted by other issues.
Coming to that, on the same part, like, we think everything is so good in Kerala. What are the problems that still plague and that come up in the election that badly needs some addressing, the top two problems that badly need addressing from Kerala? Because from outside we see everyone is literate, everyone's educated, pretty prosperous state, but what are we missing here?
Two issues I think which have been part of, I think, constant this thing is about whether the so-called famed Kerala model has sort of hit a roadblock. That is, what happens after this? Because you find that you need to think out of the box now. You have reached a certain stage of development, and yet we also see that there is a growing inequality within the state. Okay, and what one also finds is that unlike earlier efforts at welfare, now welfare is more targeted rather than universal. Okay, so it's attempting to overcome those inequalities, and therefore it's an attempt. However, this welfare model doesn't necessarily have the support of the middle class, which earlier actually benefited from that welfare model of the state. So those who benefited from this earlier welfare model are now seceding from it. They don't want it because they can live without it. Okay, and therefore they are looking at new options. So the middle class, therefore, I think doesn't have so much stake in that welfare state, and they believe that it's inefficient. At the same time, I said there is growing inequalities because there are still vulnerable sections within the population, okay, who are badly affected by the nature of the growth that is taking place. Like Kerala also has Adivasis, you also have fisher folk, you have poor people who still need the helping hand of the state. Now, Kerala also has, I need to mention, is the problem is of problems would be of unemployment and the lack of, let's say, related to that would be lack of industry and industrial development. Of course, industrial development we cannot have much of the nature of which you will have in other states because of the limited amount of land that is available, and also in terms of environmental concerns that are there. So Kerala can attract only a particular type of investment into a particular type of economic sector, basically the services sector. Now, Kerala, I think, was one of the pioneering states when it actually came to setting up industrial parks and focusing on the IT related thing. And it was, I think, only subsequently that Karnataka, Andhra, and others took over. So Kerala, I think, made those initial beginnings, but did not give it that push that other states have been. So I think Kerala needs to think out of the box that one, how can it sustain this development model? Second, how can it keep its how can it sort of keep its youth gainfully employed within the state? Remember that a lot of people are dependent on people working outside the state, the non-resident Keralites, both in the Middle East and other parts of the world, as well as in the country. So I think the challenge would be to both have growth and equity at the same time, and that I think is a challenge for whether it is the two main fronts in the state.
So to conclude, not much of an anti-incumbency factor this time around, and it is LDF advantage LDF, and it's their election to lose. Is that a right way to conclude? Or is it going to be, or is it going to be one of these tight races, unexpected tight races, and some third-party NDA will come into picture and form a hung government? What do you think it's going to happen if you had to bet something on it?
Okay, so if you were to go with the pre-poll surveys that have come out, they have almost everyone has given it to the LDF. But then if one goes with history and the past this thing, then, and given the fact that these are going to be very close contests,
sure,
and with the third party cutting in, we don't know where it will eat, which player who is going to affect more.
Sure.
So one cannot also then rule out whether the UDF
will form an alliance with NDA.
No, that's not that. I think that will not happen. But I think the UDF will also should not. I don't know. I don't going by past history. I don't think it will.
It's literally like Congress and BJP is going to form an alliance. That's not going to happen.
No, that I don't think will happen.
Sure. Sure.
It will not happen.
Well, sir, think about politics. You never say never, because in Andhra, Chandrababu Naidu had allied with Congress in the 2019 elections. But, that's just fantasy land. That's just fictional land. But I also believe that, looking at the news, that it's advantage LDF, especially after COVID and the way he handled COVID and the appreciation that he got. I think there's a positive sentiment for it. So, betting on that, sir, thank you very much for your time. It's been a fascinating chat. Thank you very much for educating us about upcoming Kerala elections. Hope you enjoyed the chat.
Thank you for having me here, Najib.
That's it from this episode, folks. Till we see you next time with another episode. Bye, everyone.